Shalom, everyone. We're going to continue with our weekly study. As always, we're looking at our assignment from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, which instructs us to study to show ourselves approved unto the Most High, workmen who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, as well as 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, that tells us that all scripture is God-breathed and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the person of the Most High may be complete, thoroughly furnished unto every good works. As you know, we've been going through the book of Proverbs, and we're in Proverbs, going into Proverbs chapters 18 and 19. And we'll do that during our next session, but because things are happening so quickly, and the whole purpose of our Bible studies has been to be able to see where the Most High wants his people in this particular point in time. So we're in the midst of a year of repairing the breach, going back and rebuilding. But even as we look at our lessons through that lens, we also are understanding that the world that we live in seems to be crumbling around us. And as human beings, it is certainly understandable if we get pulled along with that negative energy. So every once in a while, I think it's good for the Father to recenter us, if you will. And that's where we do the Selah lessons, but also on this particular lesson, we're going to be doing that not as a stepping back, but just as a reminder of things that he has told us from past lessons. So we're not going to specifically be in Proverbs today. We're going to be actually in three other passages that are very relevant to where the society and the culture is. So we're going to start with the concept of connecting dots. Okay. So this is the time for us to consider that the recent social phenomena are actually all connected or interconnected. And if we look for the message that's being presented by the Most High, especially to his people, then that gives us the comfort and the peace that we need. So we're going to be looking very specifically at scriptures from Matthew first. So we're going to pull that up. Matthew chapter 24. And in Matthew chapter 24, if you remember, this is the chapter where Yeshua and the disciples have been coming out of the temple. The disciples mention how impressed they are with those who built the temple, the structure of the temple, the intricacies of the work, as well as just its general magnitude. And that's when Yeshua tells them that what you're looking at, not one stone will be upon another in a very short period of time. And they began to ask him, well, when's that going to happen? And when is the end of the earth, the age going to be? And so that's where we're going to pick up in verse 4. And we'll read quite a bit of Matthew chapter 24, starting at verse 4. Jesus answered, or Yeshua answered, see to it that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming I'm the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then they will deliver you over to be persecuted and killed, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. At that time, many will fall away and will betray and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and mislead many. Because of the multitude of wickedness, The love of most will grow cold, but the one who perseveres to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination of desolation described by the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop come down to retrieve anything from his house, and let none in the field return for his cloak. And it goes on in verses 19 to talk about what's going to happen at that particular point in time. I'm not going to read those scriptures because that's really talking about in 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed. But in verse 23, it says, at that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, don't believe it. For false Christ and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders that would deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you in advance. So if they tell you, there he is in the wilderness, don't go out. Here he is in the inner rooms, don't believe it. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there's a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heavens will be shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. I'm going to jump down a little bit more. Verse 36, no one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they were oblivious until the flood came and swept them all away. So it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day on which your master will come. But understand this, if the homeowner had known in which watch of the night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. For this reason, you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour you do not expect. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of his household to give the others their food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says in his heart, my master will be away a long time, and he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day he does not expect, and at an hour he does not anticipate. Then he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We're going to also look at Luke chapter 21, but before we do, this is why we're looking at Proverbs and looking at Proverbs from the standpoint of building up the person that the Most High wants us to be, so that the nation that the Most High wants to come to fruition can be born again. Okay, so once we have been awakened, we are to be doing what verse 42 says, keeping watch, knowing that there's a day coming when he will come, but while he has yet to come, our job is to build, rebuild, watch, pray, and be ready. Okay, so that's why we're looking at Proverbs. And the reason why we're looking at this particular passage is to let us know that in the process of doing what we have been given to do, the world is going to hell. Not going to go to hell. The world is going to hell. The hell that is around us is real, but we are to be building during the time when all of this chaotic activity is happening. So that's why we're looking at this. We need to see, that's why this lesson is about connecting the dots. We can't forget who we are. We can't forget where we are. And neither can we forget the purpose that the Most High has given us. He put us here at this time for a reason. And that reason is to be a light and to be salt to those who are looking for it. So there's just one other passage that we want to look at. Well, actually two others. And then we'll look at that. This whole lesson, we'll bring it together. But now we're going to look at Luke chapter 21. And this is the same account, but with slightly different, with a slightly different focus. Okay. So let me see if I can find where I wanted us to be. Well, I'm going to start in Luke chapter 21, verse 12. This is when Yeshua was talking specifically to his disciples. All right. And it says in verse 12, but before all this, they will seize you and persecute you on account of my name. They will deliver you to the synagogues and prisons, and they will bring you before kings and governors. This will be your opportunity to serve as witnesses. So make up your mind not to worry beforehand how to defend yourselves. For I will give you speech and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. The reason I wanted to start here, or the reason actually the Spirit directed us to these few verses, is as we go back and rebuild, as we see, part of the rebuilding is telling the Most High's people who they are. And in the process of doing that, we are awakening the people of the Most High to not only their identity, but their purpose. However, as we do that, the enemy, once the enemy sees what we're doing, is going to vamp on us, is going to come against us with everything that the enemy has. And that is happening during this particular point in time. But what some of our people are doing who are awake is they are chafing underneath that pushback, if you will. We have this thought that once we know what the truth is, and once we express what the truth is, that other people are going to accept the truth. That's not how it works. That's why it's important for us to connect these dots. As soon as you come into the truth, you put a target on your back so that Satan knows who you are and is out to destroy you. That comes not in the form always of people who are obviously your enemies. Sometimes it comes in the form of people who are coming from your family, people who are coming from the same religious community that you were a part of. And so what's been going on among those who are awakening is all of this backbiting and trading of insults and beating of the chest to show that I'm just as good or I'm better than you. All this is happening because we have forgotten the assignment, okay? Or we have been confused as to why the Most High has given us this information. It's not to puff us up. It's to wake our people up. And if the people don't want to be awakened, Jesus already said, Yeshua already said, when he sent his disciples out the first time, go to a place that is receptive of what you have to say. If when you go there, they let you know in no uncertain terms that they're not accepting what you say, then leave them alone. Shake the dust off your feet and keep it moving. You don't stay there and engage people who don't want the message. He also said, don't give your pearls before swine. Well, how would you know if it's a swine? It depends on how that person receives the blessing that you have to offer them. And there are too many people right now trying to shove a message down the throat of people who don't want it. If they don't want it, they're not the people that you're trying to reach. It's just that simple. So that's what he's letting us know in Luke chapter 21. This is going to happen from our own family members, but it doesn't mean that once we come into the knowledge of the truth, that we automatically have to separate ourselves from our family and friends and loved ones. What it means is when we tell people, here's what the Most High has shown me, and they accept it, they become our spiritual brothers and sisters, if you will. But if they reject it, then they become those who are not, who the message is not for. And we can't make them do something that they don't want to do. Okay, so we'll go ahead. That's what's going on with the Most High's people as we speak, because the purpose is to make someone else believe what you believe, and if they won't do it, then make a fool out of that other person. That is the wrong spirit. That's the same spirit that Peter had when he took that sword and struck off the ear of the high priest's servant. That's the wrong spirit. And so a lot of our people are spending most of their time cultivating that wrong spirit. But had they read and embraced what Matthew chapter 24 said and what we're reading in Luke 21, there's another vision. There's another way of seeing how we're supposed to hold this blessing. And that's what this lesson is about. Because the lesson is about what it looks like to actually build, to actually do work that's going to produce the blessings of the kingdom. It's not what you want. It's what the Most High has set us here to do. So we're coming to a time, as verse 20 says, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you will know that her desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out. Let those in the country stay out of the city. The same thing that was said in Matthew chapter 24. And those days are going to be miserable. Now, that was talking about, again, 70 AD. But then he says in verse 25, there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among the nations, bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves. People have identified that as global warming, but that's man's identifier. The Most High has already said this is going to happen. This is one of the birth pangs, if you will, of the times right before the Most High returns. Okay, and in verse 26, it says, men will faint from fear and anxiety over what is coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. At that time, see, when we see all of that happening, at that time, they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. The Son of Man has not come yet with power and great glory. We're getting close because that's what the birth pangs are showing us. When these things begin to happen, stand up. Who's he talking about standing up? He's talking about his people. Stand up. Lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Then he goes on to say, look at the fig tree and all the trees. when they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of Yahuwah is near. We're supposed to be watching, we're supposed to be praying, we're supposed to be recognizing the signs, but we're not supposed to be overcome by all of the turmoil that's going on as we speak. Okay, because he says in verse 32, this is how we can embrace this. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. Well, what generation? The generation that experiences the culmination of these things that Yeshua has just said. Then he says in verse 33, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But watch yourselves, this is what I've been saying, okay? Watch yourselves, or your hearts will be weighed down by dissipation, drunkenness, and the worries of life. And that day will spring upon you suddenly like a snare. While you're busy trying to beat someone else up with the Bible, you are not going to be ready when that day springs up, because you will already be occupied by how Satan has distracted you. Yes, this is a distraction from hell. That's why this lesson is so important for the children of the Most High to understand. We have work to do. We cannot afford the kind of activities that we find ourselves engaged right now. It's easy to belittle and humiliate other human beings. It's easier to identify our enemy and try to kill our enemy in the physical realm. That's why the previous the couple of previous lessons were given. We're not wrestling with flesh and blood. And that's what we're spending our time doing. We're spending our time wrestling with flesh and blood and missing the fact that our war is against principalities. It's against powers. It's against the rulers of the darkness of this world. It's against spiritual wickedness in high places. This is going on above the earth. What we are to be doing on the earth is not fighting human beings with flesh and blood. It's to be building his kingdom, starting in our own hearts and then bringing that blessing to others who are of like precious faith, so that the world can see this is what the kingdom of the Most High looks like. That's what the Most High's people are supposed to be doing in this day. So again, for it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the earth, verse 35. So keep watch at all times and pray that you may have the strength to escape all that is about to happen and to stand before the Son of Man. We're going to have to answer for every word, every thought that we speak and think. We will be standing before the Son of Man. And who is he that we're standing before? He is the King. He is the Mashiach. Now, you can think all you want to that because I'm a part of the bloodline of Israel, that things are going to be cool with us. No, they will only be cool with you and the Most High, the King, as you stand before him in the name of Jesus, in the name of Yeshua, because it's by his blood that any of us are able to stand before him. So every day Jesus taught in the temple, but every evening he went out to spend the night on the Mount of Olives. And that should be a way that we do things too. When we have to engage the public, when we have to engage our enemies, because I'm not saying that we won't have to do that, but the thing that I am speaking, especially to the people of the Most High, is that the Most High wants us centered. And so spending time in meditation after we've been doing this work will continue to center us. So those two scriptures. Now we're gonna go to the we have just a couple of slides that sort of encapsulate all of that. Okay, so we'll go back here again. This is how the dots are connected. the things that we have just said. Well, what are the dots that are being connected? The pandemic is going to continue, or the plandemic, however you want to call it. War games that are going on. There are war games going on nationally, regionally, in this nation as we speak. That's not even to mention the international war games, the heat wave that's going on, the floods that are happening, all of the social unrest that is in the culture, the specific war in the Ukraine, and all the other wars that are not being reported on. The war in Ethiopia that was started by those who don't live on the planet, on the continent. Excuse me, that might have been a Freudian slip. By those who don't live on the continent. Actually, there are probably 7 or 8 wars going on right now. And the reason why these things are being mentioned is because all of this, from the pandemics up through the wars, put pressure on the soul. We are under immense pressure. And that's why it's the connecting of the dots that's so important. The fact now, this is something that we're going to speak more to, but everybody knows that the monarchy in England has changed. What you may not know is that that last monarch was there for 70 years. Okay, 70 in the Bible is significant. And so we need to talk about that. In other words, even in that scenario, something has just ended and something else is beginning. The one who has taken her place is not it. Okay. Those 70 years represent an empire that has had a death grip on the entire planet. So the discussion isn't about the individual who was sitting on that throne. The discussion is about the principality that was controlling that. It's changing. This is a war that's going on in the heavenlies, as we had said before. Socially and politically, we see the collapse of the social structure in the land of our captivity, called the USA. We see the fact that but it's not just the USA. We see the fact that in Europe is in upheaval. India is in upheaval. There are conflicts going on the continent of Africa, as well as in South America. All of the world is in upheaval. Okay. And yet, well, we talked about the war games, the things that are going on with gender ambiguity, which is things are different in this age than they have been in previous ages. Okay. And then there's finally a verse in Revelation. Well, not a verse, actually, it's a passage in Revelation chapter 12. I'm going to read that. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man child, and who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God, that she should be fed there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. I'm going to jump down to verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, and to her place where she is nourished for a time, times, and a half a time. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. The earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Yahuwah and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, I wanted to read that, and that's another passage that we will go into more detail. But this is the connecting of the dots. When you start looking across the world at where these conflicts are taking place, see, when Yeshua told his disciples about that, he gave them part of the story. The part of the story that they could relate to was when all of these things are happening, don't worry, just keep doing what I gave you to do. Okay. But the larger narrative has to do, and always had to do, with his people. If you remember, Yeshua said, I am only come to the lost tribes of Israel. Everything that Yeshua did, he did among the people that he came out of. He is that woman's child. Okay. He's the one that was caught up into heaven. And that woman represent the people of Israel. Wherever there has been conflict in the world, now we're talking about how to connect the dots from the scriptures perspective. Okay. Everybody knows that the world has always had wars and rumors of wars and all of that. But what you may not understand is that when the Most High's people were scattered, they did not lose, from his perspective, their status. And the people around them understood that, and as always, were jealous and tried to kill the Most High's people. Now, the Most High's people had to be punished, and that's because of the disobedience that they exhibited, the rebellion that they exhibited, and that's how they became scattered, as the scriptures say, to the four corners of the world, not just to the north, not just to the south, but to the four corners of the world. Wherever the Most High's people went, they were persecuted. And that's what Deuteronomy chapter 28 warned about. It doesn't matter where the Most High's people go, wherever you go, you're going to find yourselves out of my will, and therefore you're going to have to deal with the consequences of being out of my will. But the people who come against you, the Most High is going to judge those people, which is where the dots then begin to be connected. Okay, so when it says about this dragon, this is the same serpent that was in the garden. It's that old serpent, that serpent of old. That serpent has 7 heads and 10 crowns. We keep looking for flesh and blood people. This is a spiritual understanding. Okay, this is what the Spirit is giving. And those 7 heads represent completion. Completion of what? Completion of evil. That's what the dragon represents. And that's what the dragon is. It's the sum total of evil. And it's the sum total of evil that goes after the Most High's people. Well, how does that play itself out on the earth? When you map where all of these conflicts are, what you're going to find, and I would encourage you to research this, I believe what you're going to find is that the Most High's people were somehow involved in those areas. And the people who came against them are the ones that in this last day, all of these negative things that are happening. So the Most High is using the heavenly realm. The Most High is using the earthly realm with the waters and the fires, but it's coming on those who have come against his people. This is where the dots get connected. The seven heads and the seven crowns represent the full force of evil coming against the Most High's people. And the Most High, then when the Most High's people are scattered, the dragon goes after the Most High's people, trying to destroy her with water. Well, what is water representative of in Scripture? Prophetically, water always has to do with peoples. So, in other words, the Most High's people went into all of the various people groups, and in those various people groups, wherever the Most High's people were, they became a byword. They became the despised. So whatever people group is the despised people group on this planet, most likely belongs to the Most High. That's true in the United States of America. It's true in the Caribbean. It's true in South America. It's true on the continent of Africa. It's true in Europe. It's true in India and China. So wherever the Most High's people are, whoever is on the bottom of those societies, that's the Most High's people. And the way that those people are treated, the Most High sees. And he is now at the point of dealing with those who have come against his people. So that's the water that's sent to destroy. And that's why it says the earth swallows up the water. His people have gone to various lands, and he's actually kept them in those lands, even though the status or the state that his people are in is always a depressed state. So that's the earth again, mitigating what the water is there to do. Okay, so that's the idea of the wilderness. In 2017, there was a sign in the heavens, and it was the sign of Revelation chapter 12, where the woman with the moon under her feet, the sun at her head, and the 12 crowns that she wore, being pursued again by the dragon, the other side. That took place in 2017. 2019, there was another marker that even a wicked government acknowledged, and that's the 400 years that has been talked about in this particular country. So there have been markers, if you will, of what we have been talking about. But because we're not looking at the right people, we're not seeing and able to connect these dots. So again, these wars, rumors of wars, nations versus nations, the multiplication of wickedness. By the way, a Messiah overwhelmingly is just a ruler. Okay, it's that person that has been anointed to rule or to lead, whether it's in the case of the rulers or the anointed ones in the temple, or the anointed ones such as King David, the royal house of David. Basically, it's a royal. Okay, so there are false royals, and I'll let you connect that dot yourself. But the fact that all of those things are happening, the nation being under attack in various ways, all of the deceptions that are going on, and that's why it's important for the Most High's people to be centered, so that we will be able to tell a deception from that which is real. And then again, the signs in the heavens that are announcing that the coming of the Son of Man is imminent. So the last dot to connect is, so now that we have been given a sense of what these things look like in total, what are we supposed to do? Well, that's where we have been told in Isaiah. Well, actually, this is, I think this is the part that's in Luke. It says, but watch yourselves, or your hearts will be weighed down by dissipation, drunkenness, and the worries of life. Okay, that's what the Most Highest people don't want to have happen. And that day will spring upon you suddenly like a snare. We're not supposed to be fooled during this time, for it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the earth. That's why the entire earth is in a state of moaning and groaning, as the scriptures had already said. So what are we supposed to do? Keep watch at all times and pray that you may have the strength to escape all that is about to happen and to stand before the Son of Man. Okay, so we read that scripture before, and that's where we will end. So we are to be encouraged that the Most High has not forgotten us, his people. And no matter where on the planet we are, he knows who we are, but with the understanding also that our enemy knows who we are. And that's why we're catching it regardless of where geographically we, his people, happen to be. So yes, that is what's going on, but it's within that understanding that he tells us, his people, that's why I want you to go back and rebuild. Go back not to a physical location, go back to my word and rebuild yourself and your family and your community based on my principles and my precepts, so that when I do come to rule with a rod of iron, you'll be ready to rule and reign with me. Again, we will continue our study going back to Proverbs, but this is the context that we're looking at, and how that will play itself out on a daily basis with the Most High's people. So the Father bless you and keep you. The Father make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Father lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.